The UK has now overtaken the US in terms of percentage of obese people.
You are joking me.
The stats say there's 850,000 people walking around the UK with diabetes who don't know they've got it.
I am yet to speak to anybody who didn't have a stressful occasion within 3 years of being diagnosed with cancer.
It might even be a stressful email, a bill to pay, a problem with a member of staff. The problem is, in this modern day and age, we're constantly being bombarded with things that are spiking our cortisol.
And this is on repeat every single day, every week, every month.
And a lot of men use dopamine, so highs, to make themselves feel better than they really do.
1 in 5 men die before the age of 65.
Men are 3 times more likely to die from suicide than women.
There's a disparity. Why is men's health not equal to women's?
40% of men say they've never spoken to anyone about what they're experiencing.
The whole build up to this is going to be a point where something bad is going to happen to someone who's overweight
Completely.
and under a lot of stress.
And with most people, there are lots of warning signs, either
Layla, Becki, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Dodge.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, very much looking forward to this one. Just so people know, Layla, men's health expert,
Nutritional therapist.
And many more to your bow. And we've got Becki, who's a life coach. And they've both been on the podcast before. Becki's been on twice now. And the first one was episode 103, which was about toxic relationships and narcissistic abuse. And the other episode was 125, was about men's trauma. And they are both so powerful.
And you know what? I'm still getting emails and calls and messages on social media regarding those, and I think the first one was like 2 years ago or something.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Really
and
touched
Layla
people.
really touched people. And Layla, we did your episode 222, which was so powerful as well, about how sugar
is killing people, and particularly around men's health.
Yeah.
That was around 6 months ago. So again, the outreach, the messages that we've had.
It's unreal, isn't it?
Yeah, the positive words, the life-changing experiences that people have been on. Yeah.
We've done over 250 episodes, and those episodes that you've done, more men have reached out to me going, oh my God, you've actually just saved my life. Or, oh my God, I've improved my life. Oh my God, I got in contact with Layla. I got in contact with Becki. It's been outstanding. So welcome back. And this is the first time we had both of you together. So this is going to be really powerful. Anyone listening and watching, honestly, this is a really powerful episode.
Well, thanks for having us, Dodge. I mean, thanks for having us back on and to the team.
It's a delight.
Because like you say, we have literally been changing lives for the better, extending lives, and really just like you said, it was like there was a rock and we lifted it up, and all these guys who didn't know where to get help, who to ask, how to find a nutritional therapist even, or to get help with their mental health, where to go, they didn't know.
And now we know.
Now they know.
Now we know, which is amazing.
Yep.
Anyway, the title of this one, we've called it The 5 Biggest Killers of Men. Number 1, heart disease. Number 2, suicide. Number 3, obesity. Number 4, cancer. And number 5, diabetes. And Layla and Becki are going to be talking through everything right now. So let's fire straight in. Who are we going to start with? Should we start with Layla?
Well, we're going to start with heart disease, cardiovascular disease, because it is actually the number 1 biggest killer worldwide. And actually, I don't think a lot of people know that. Maybe it was cancer or diabetes. It's actually heart disease. And I think the reason we don't really think about that is because you can't see your heart. You can't feel it. It really is a silent killer. And we really want to bring awareness to this. And what Becki and I are going to do is going to tie in a lot of the reasons for this, the physiological, the emotional, the psychological, the reasons why the heart health is struggling so much. And like I mentioned to you, I've had so many guys come forward into my clinic, and we've run a lot of tests, and I've helped them along the way. And you would be surprised, Dodge, at the number of people in their 30s and 40s who have suboptimal bad cholesterol, problems with their HDL, their LDL, their heart health in general, their blood sugar, their cardiovascular system is struggling in their 30s.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Why? Just to break down, what is heart disease?
Heart disease is a term for a number of different factors that can impact the heart. And ultimately that may end up with a heart attack, but really it may start with the very early signs. And one of those is high blood pressure. So high blood pressure is going to put pressure on your vascular system. And things that can cause high blood pressure, for example, would be stress. You know, stress can do that. High amounts of salt in your diet, for example. And then that can then lead to issues such as inflammation on the vascular lining. So then you start to have an unhealthy vascular lining, which can then cause the bad cholesterol to build up. And then you have this cholesterol build up, and then potentially you're going to get things such as angina and, you know, heart disease, potentially, you know, further down the line. We're talking like, you know, this stuff takes decades to really present itself and become a problem.
But if you've abused yourself in your 20s and 30s, you're going to really notice it in your 40s.
Yeah.
Like bad eating, bad food, too much alcohol. And when you thought, I'm seeing it now, friends of mine in their 40s who are really struggling because they've abused their body for 20 years now. There's lots of people out there who've been abusing their body. Just going back to heart disease, and you're saying cardiovascular, and you're saying, are you saying what's getting clogged up? Is it the blood being blocked into the heart to create a heart attack?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the underlying factor is inflammation. So that inflammation can come from things such as stress, high sugar, junk food, additives, you know, general wear and tear, you know, immune system dysfunction, viruses, toxins. That can all create these tiny little microflares of inflammation on the vascular lining. Then what happens is if you also have the high bad cholesterol, we call it, that's something around in the blood, and that can go and stick to the arterial wall like a plaster.
Okay.
So it thinks it's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's trying to patch up the problem. Then ultimately what you get is a build up, and that build up, like I say, can take decades. But what I like to say is the cholesterol was found at the scene of the crime, but it didn't actually do the crime. You need to look further upstream at what caused the damage to the vascular lining. And like you're saying, years and years of potential, you know, abuse, overuse of alcohol, sugar, stress, drugs, toxins, all this kind of stuff is damaging this very delicate lining which is covering our entire bodies.
You know, I think it's quite mad when we break all this down. Obviously, we're all passionate about this, but you can't see what's going on inside.
No.
You can feel it. Like if you're lean, you feel a spring in your step. If you're obese and overweight, what is it? Obesity is over 30% body fat in a man?
Yep. Yeah.
But just to break that down, because a lot of people don't understand what 30% body fat is. If you saw someone walking down the street, you may go, oh, he's overweight. Do you look at it and go, I think he'd be in the obese category?
It's really difficult to tell, particularly with guys, because you might have a guy who's very tall, very stocky. You know, it's quite easy to sort of hide or not be that noticeable in a guy, I would say. But what we need to be careful for is the visceral fat, the fat that's stuck to the organs and actually inside under the stomach lining. That is the kind of toxic fat that can really build up and cause a lot of problems down the line.
And do you notice that, like, if a guy was there in his boxer shorts or a pair of rugby shorts or something, you would see the back fat so thick? That's got to play a part to tell whether someone's obese or not by grabbing the back fat and understanding you've got way too much fat in you, probably 30% plus.
Yeah, so we joke about the beer belly, you know, but you've got to be careful of that fat. That is dangerous fat. That's holding on to toxins. It's causing issues with your estrogen to testosterone ratios. It's potentially going to lead to raised bad cholesterol, potentially going to lead to cancer. Obesity is this toxic milieu that's really causing a lot of harm. But just to say, we've had so many success stories.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you last week about the last man that I saw who came into my clinic, who I've been seeing a few times now. He's lost 5 stone in the time since he first listened to our podcast.
30 kg.
And now he's thinking about training for a triathlon.
Fantastic.
So that is life-changing stuff.
Yeah, it is life-changing.
Yeah.
I've had so many messages come through, and you and I bounce on WhatsApp going, oh my God, do you remember this guy's just come through, this guy's just come through. It's like we're changing lives. We're really, really helping men here.
Yeah.
Powerful.
More than you realise, actually. And I think Layla very sort of well described some of the physical ways to look at what creates heart disease. But, you know, and some of those, like the visceral fat, are visible. But what about stress?
Yeah.
How do you know when you're stressed? And I think one of the biggest issues for men in particular is that they're not recognizing when they're stressed, because stress has been sort of an award. Lots of people will admit they're stressed, but they won't admit they're fearful. They won't admit that they're not sleeping at night. They won't admit that they're drinking 2 bottles of wine a night just to cope with their day.
So what's the feeling of being super stressed related to the heart? So the stress is like that tension on you that you've got so much bills to pay, or your business is not working, or your relationship's not working, or your finances are gone tits up. It's just building more and more pressure to your heart straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your blood pressure and to your nervous system, and obviously gastro issues as well. So another indicators I'm sure Layla will pick up with is actually having lots of gastro issues.
What, from your gut?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Layla, do you want to pick up with the gastro issues?
Well, yeah, just from a physiological point of view, gastro issues. But I was also going to mention cortisol. So you've got adrenaline and cortisol that spike. Now we want adrenaline and cortisol to spike. Cortisol gets us up in the morning, gets us going, gets us moving. Adrenaline, it's going to save our lives if a car comes out from, the road.
So cortisol, just to explain to the listener, is a stress hormone.
It's a stress hormone, and, ancestrally, we want that to be able to run away from the tiger, for example, save our lives. The problem is, in this modern day and age, we're constantly being bombarded with things that are spiking our cortisol. Yeah. It might even be a stressful email, a bill to pay, a problem with a member of staff. Yeah. Cortisol is going boom, 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 boom around the system.
Well, it's 24/7 activity, and actually when we look very carefully about how our stress systems work, you've got something called your autonomic nervous system. And part of that is your sympathetic nervous system, which is like the accelerator of a car. Yeah. And then you've got your parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake of a car. And in an ideal place, physiologically, you are using the accelerator and the brake. And if you imagine if you were to drive your car only using the accelerator until you hit the wall, that would be someone who's constantly in stress. And yet many, many people are living like that day to day. And you're living like that because you may sleep, but what you're doing is collapsing into exhaustion every night. You're not actually going down and taking yourself down into natural REM sleep. You may be, chasing dopamine to try and get energy. And by that's kind of highs and lifts. So a lot of social media is designed to give you dopamine lifts as a way of trying to manage your exhaustion. So the more you distract yourself, the less likely you are you are to know that you're stressed. And in with this accelerator and brake, you've also got an ancient nerve called your vagus nerve. And that runs from your brain through your heart down to your digestive system. So it really does have a powerful effect. So, yes, you've got to, if the demands on you are really high and your resources are too low, then you have got a problem.
How do you know when someone's stressed? You'll know when someone's stressed when you see someone, they're under pressure at work, the finances aren't working, whatever it may be. How do you know that you're stressed when you wake up in the morning?
Because you wake up, a lot of people wake up with shock. They actually wake up and they're on from the minute that they go. Other people go the other way, and it doesn't matter how long they've slept, they wake up and they feel exhausted. Now, there are other things that come into play, like autoimmune conditions. And also, as Layla referenced earlier, inflammation can have a big impact on your energy levels.
Just to break down what you mean by inflammation.
Inflammation. So the technical term, in the immune system fires off what's called cytokines. And cytokines are little messages. So if you have a cut, then the immune system is going to go to that site to try to start to cause inflammation, start to patch it up. But what we're talking about is chronic inflammation. So we're talking about these cytokines being infiltrated all around the body by this mechanism of stress, basically, and high alert from the stress that comes in through the brain down to the adrenal glands and firing off from the immune system, these cytokines. We don't want these cytokines to be there around the brain, causing brain fog, like I say, the vascular lining, that inflammation on the vascular lining. And sometimes what causes this can be the psychological problems that we're having, causing this physiological spike in inflammation, which causes chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is probably the underlying cause of most disease.
And all of this can relate to heart attack.
Yes.
And you don't know whether you're going to heart attack, whether you're going to die or you'll survive.
No, you have no idea.
So anyone listening out there, any men listening out there, you've got to change your lifestyle. If you're feeling that this is you, not eating well, overweight, not training, feel stressed, haven't got any energy in the morning, you wake up, trying to just get through life, and then having anxiety on top and stress on top, that's the quickest thing that can relate to a heart attack.
But also a lot of people, particularly in men, because they've learned to cut away from their feelings.
Yeah.
So they're not actually feeling overwhelmed. They're not feeling negative or depressed. And a lot of men use dopamine, so highs, to make themselves feel better than they really do. So extreme exercise would be an example of that. So if your way of not facing the anxiety that you have from childhood trauma is to go and do triathlon after triathlon after Ironman after Ironman, then actually what does your body have to say about that? What are you actually doing? And most people in that case are trying to numb emotional pain by being in control of the physical pain that they're introducing.
Foods as well. Yeah. So talking about last time, the response I had from the Yucca app and the amount of people
are using Yucca now. My boy uses it. We go around the supermarket, he's Yucca-ing everything.
Everyone's Yucca-ing.
My old man's Yucca. Everyone I know is Yucca-ing.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Down to our podcast.
All down to that. I know.
Anyone out there, there's an app called Yucca, Y-U-K-A, and it's phenomenal.
But the reason for me mentioning that was I was talking around ultra processed foods and obviously sugar. And I think what has been happening was that a lot of people were kind of self-medicating with these things. So like we're talking about circadian rhythm and the sleep-wake cycle and the cortisol and the stress. You get up in the morning, your cortisol is actually chronically low because it's not firing off as it should do. You have a coffee or 2 or 5 or whatever, that gets you through the morning. Then you have a slump because your blood glucose has gone down. Then you feel crap. So then you have to find some energy. So then you reach for the high processed foods or the sugars to get your highs up, and then the dopamine needs, and it's this cycle.
And then you're just trying to get through your day like this. And this is on repeat every single day, every week, every month. And the whole build up to this is going to be a point where something bad is going to happen to someone who's overweight.
Completely.
And under a lot of stress.
And with most people, there are lots of warning signs, either emotionally and psychologically. For many people, they won't see it themselves. It may be their loved ones that's saying, you're doing too much of this, you're working too hard, you're drinking too hard, you're partying too hard. But also, and it's very difficult, I think, if it's a working too hard, to pull somebody into accountability, because nobody really asks, I do daily, but no one's really asking the entrepreneur, what are you doing with your time in the day? So it's often too late when problems come into flag. We mentioned the vagus nerve earlier, and there's a quick tip I'd like to give the listeners as well. It doesn't solve everything. You've got to change some serious habits and look at what's driving them, but something to just reduce the stress is to actually get your vagus nerve working better, because what can happen under long periods of stress is your vagus nerve becomes dysregulated. So it's not behaving to day-to-day life stresses as it should be, so it's essentially we're not accelerating and braking. So a good little way to try and get your feeling better in that moment when you are under immense stress, or even if you don't know you are, is to regulate your vagus nerve. And a good little tip to do this, everyone's got some kinesiology tape, and I've brought an example here. So it's just like a plaster, but without a wound care in it. And what you do is you cut a length and then you stick it. I've got earphones on here, but you stick it just behind your ear and down. There's a muscle just down through your neck. You just stick it there on both sides. And what that will do is it will start to pull your nervous system into regulation. Now, it sounds very simple. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it's going to give you some capacity back. What you may experience when you do that is you might find your hands start twitching. You might find you get an overwhelm of anxiety before it settles down. So don't do it right as you go to bed. I would suggest doing it a few hours before you go to bed. And then just, sit with the tape on. You don't have to do long strips. You can also do small square ones just to sit behind the ear. And what that does is it starts to regulate the nervous system and bring more blood into the system as well, which then activates your heart and your nervous system and your digestive system too.
Which gets that inflammation down, gets that cortisol down, gets the happier hormones up, the serotonin.
We all love the happy hormones.
All the happy hormones, the calming ones, the GABA, the neurotransmitters that bring that sense of calm and regulation.
Have we got any stats on heart disease?
So generally talking about men, which is what we're here for, to talk about International Men's Health Day, we were going to talk about some stats around men's health. Yeah. And unfortunately, men live 4 years less than women. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 4 years, 1 in 5 men die before the age of 65. You know, through the pandemic with COVID, worldwide, twice as many men died of COVID. And in the UK, it was 20,000 more men than women died of COVID. So there clearly is a big issue going on here. There's a disparity. Why is men's health not equal to women's? You know, we're trying to look at the underlying reasons for that and trying to link that between this stress element, you know, the mental health we'll talk about, the stats around suicide, which we're going to come on to because it is...
Let's move on to suicide.
Yeah.
Because this is a really powerful one.
I think this subject, it's the second biggest killer of men.
Yeah.
And we are just not having the right conversations about this. 2 men a day die in the UK from suicide. And men are 3 times more likely to die from suicide than women. In 2020, 3/4 of registered suicide deaths were men.
75% were men. Wow. Why do you think there's more suicides in men than women?
Because I think that, 40% of men say they've never spoken to anyone about what they're experiencing. I think we've also got a legacy that goes back, a long time where don't feel your feelings, don't cry like a girl, don't look at your vulnerability, don't actually acknowledge what you've experienced. On a daily basis, my heart breaks when I hear the stories of the men that come to see me, and a lot of them are really tough men, and their childhoods, they've experienced extreme violence, alcoholic parents. Sometimes the violence hasn't been orientated at them, but they've had to sit and listen to other members of their family experiencing really traumatic events. So we've also got a lot of shame and a lot of rejection of vulnerability throughout men as a culture. And it's seeing vulnerability as weakness when in actual fact, what is strength is to have emotional resilience. The male psyche has celebrated and focused on mental stability. And I've met many, many men who have got exemplary mental stability, but they have absolutely no emotional coping skills other than to shut off from their emotions.
Do you think that's because men at a certain age who grew up in the 80s or 70s and 80s were like, toughen up, get up, you big
man up.
Like man up. And that's how I certainly grew up.
The biggest age gap, actually, the biggest vulnerability to men is between 45 and 54, and in particular between 40 and 44. So you're coming up to the sort of the end of that era, really. But culturally, we're passing on the same messages. And also, I think a lot of men don't know how to deal with those conversations because they're fixers. Inherently, they're fixers. So if they haven't got the solution, they'd rather not go there in the first place. Or particularly in the UK, use humour to divert away from true feelings. So, and there's also, the shame. I mean, if anyone pictures someone who's vulnerable, mostly it's not a strong man.
Yeah.
Well, I just saw recently Lewis Hamilton talking about his own mental health struggles. And this is someone, who you wouldn't expect, someone who's his A game in his career of what he does. And he's spoken out about his own mental health struggles and how actually his career was part of that was driving that stress. And also he was bullied when he was younger. And he's only seen a therapist once, he said about that. He's only spoken about it once. But as Becki is saying, I think vulnerability is a strong superpower. It's a real strength. And that's where I've been so blown over with the guys that have come to see me, because they have worn their heart on their sleeve about a lot of things, and they have shown their vulnerability to me. And in doing so, they have seen and got the help that they need in whatever that might be, mental health, physical, blood work, whatever it is. I've been so proud, really, of the people who have come forward.
Yeah, I know you're proud because I always get messages off you. Yeah. It's a nice buzz, isn't it?
It's amazing.
We've helped another man. We've helped another person. And the same with you, Becki. The amount of people, we helped another man. And we always said if we just help one person, that's good. But we're talking hundreds of people here
And you've been sending me messages as well, Dodge. And I think it's amazing that you have basically used your platform, you know, the power and, you know, everything that you've got here to basically reach out to these people who otherwise wouldn't potentially know where to get the help that they need. They might not be
here today, these people.
Honestly.
It was said, you know, quite a few people that came to me via this podcast said, I heard your voice and I just knew you could help me.
Brilliant.
And, you know, it's moments like that when you find somebody who you feel you can trust and be safe with, because I think the other reason that prevents men from getting help, and again, 40% of men said it was only when they had suicidal thoughts that they would consider getting help. And if you're at that point in your life, your suffering train has already gone past so many stations that you could have got off at. And it's understanding that, but they so fear ridicule from their peers and from family members and also from women. You know, I've also say that a lot of women have got to take responsibility that when their man opens up to them, when he shows vulnerability, it may not be in the same way a woman might. It may take some time. You know, everyone says men don't talk. Well, actually they do, if you give them the right listening ear in the right way, and you take away the fear of ridicule from that. You've got to make it safe to talk. And also to learn the language. When you've spent a lifetime numbing your feelings, you often don't have the language to describe how you're feeling either, which doesn't help. But by 2030, mental health issues are estimated to be the leading cause of death globally. So we can't sit around with this. We've got to re-educate ourselves. I have so much respect for any man who has experienced extreme violence as a child and has found a place within them where they have not replicated that with their own children. Now, to me, that is a hero.
That is a superhero. I've had many men on here, as you know, from all sorts of backgrounds, and the trauma they've experienced or the violence they've experienced as a child that hasn't been dealt with. These men end up becoming super violent themselves as an adult, whether they're a bank robber, whether they're international drug smuggler, whatever it may be, they're just replicating what the child is. The ones that have gone back and dealt with the trauma have been able to be set free as an adult. And that is a beautiful thing to see. On the note of all this, so like, you know, with mind health, mental health, I like to call it mind health and not mental health. I invested in an app called Jack. Myself and my wife invested in it. Jack. It's justaskaquestion.org, JAAQ.org. Anyone listening out there watching, go and check it out. If you are thinking about suicide, if you have heart disease or you've got obesity or you're stressed or whatever it may be, it's the most amazing app out there. I don't invest in any companies apart from our own ones. And this is one when I saw straight away how we can help so many people, men and women. And
like you say, if we just help one person but there'll be lots more. And the awareness that we're spreading. That's 10 years ago now that the government did a report on men's health. And that was over 10 years ago. And nothing was really done again up until 2019 when the WHO produced another report. So it's very, very slow to sort of catch up and get going and for the awareness to build. But I really do think in the last 3 to 5 years,
it's flying, isn't it?
It really is flying.
And that's why Jack is so important, because if you go and type in a problem, you've got pages and pages of black and white writing. Jack's all done on video. It's like, I think it's going to be an absolute unicorn of a business.
I think you mentioned, you know, a really good resource for men and women there.
Unreal.
Really good resource for men and women. But also I think it's important to understand as well that if you yourself are in a very crisis place of suicide or loved one is, to understand what you need to do to get the help.
If you got a husband who's been acting abnormal a little bit, mind you, I hear when people are thinking about suicide, they don't let anyone know and just go and do it. I've got 3 friends who've committed suicide and we didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue. So how do you know if you're married to a man or whatever it is, are there signs?
I think like Becki says, it's easy to shrug this off and say, oh, they're just down or they're just in a mood or they've just had a hard day. There are subtle signs that actually, if they go on for more than 2 to 3 weeks, we should really be considering whether that person is feeling depressed and whether they need further help. And it could be signs such as a loss of interest in eating, socializing, sleeping more, a lack of self-care.
Cutting your friends off,
not getting back to isolation. But isolation is one of the things that drives the problem. It drives inflammation. It drives depression.
Just on that note, you and I spoke about it, talk about narcissistic other halves. Yeah. That can play a huge part in a guy being pushed into a cage, keep quiet, the wife or girlfriend might cut all his friends off.
Oh, completely.
Like, this is a huge thing, and I've seen this in friends of mine, where the woman's completely in control of him, checks his mobile, doesn't trust, and then he loses his friends, he loses contact with his friends. We're all looking in going, we can see this, but he can't see it.
No, but the greater loss is the loss of yourself. And that's what an abuser will look to do.
Yeah.
They will look to make sure that you lose yourself so that they put you in a place of helplessness and powerlessness. And helplessness and powerlessness are the biggest triggers for men committing suicide, death by suicide. Women actually attempt suicide more, but men tend to die from suicide in bigger statistics, as referenced before. So we really need to grab hold of this, and as men, as a community and a world of men, to start to have better conversations about our feelings and about what we're doing. We all have a problem feeling our feelings. Mental health has began an acknowledgement of mental health issues, but what the current education hasn't done is given people the ability to work through difficult emotions. Because if you're in distress, it tells you that something is wrong and something needs to change. So if you are numbing the distress, the pain, the grief, all the things you haven't dealt with, then you are going to continue to express that
time bomb one day, isn't
in physical health problems, because what we bury in our body becomes expressed as a physical health problem. And I think that brings us very much onto our next subject, which is obesity.
Just before we go to obesity, just to let anyone bloke know out there, it's meant to be really good for your mental health that blokes go to the pub twice a week with their mates. So any missuses out there, wives or whatever, let the boys go to the pub and they can bond.
Right,
it's true. It's tribe. Blokes want to be around blokes.
Right, they need tribe.
You don't have to get on the smash in the booze. You can have a couple of pints, but blokes want to be around blokes to actually, and when they've had a couple of pints, blokes normally open up a bit more. And I think pub time for blokes really is a good thing. Agree.
Very important.
They need tribe and to get and connection.
Anyone listening out there, make sure all blokes you get the boozer with your mates.
100%. First pints on Dudge. But what I'd like to just caveat is just come back just momentarily before we move on. And that is, what do you do if someone is in crisis? Because there's one thing about saying, I'm feeling in a hopeless place, and actually being in crisis. And if somebody is in crisis, you used to call the police up until recently, who are, how they ended up in charge of the gatekeepers of mental health is beyond me. But these days you have to go to A&E. So if someone is in a real crisis, then you need to take them to A&E, which can be problematic. Obviously, if they're in a real moment of danger to themselves, the police will be a place to call to. But they need to have stability and safety at that point. It's not the time to have the therapy at that moment. You have to do whatever you need to do to get that person to be safe, and just hold that intention for that person safety when even if they can't. So I think it's really important for everyone to know. And then obviously you've got the helplines like the Samaritans who are and your GP as well. Your GP is also a gatekeeper of various psychology and psychiatry services.
If a bloke has brought up a conversation with his missus or his mates, and he said, I've been thinking about committing suicide, or I attempted, or I'm thinking about doing it, what's the first thing someone should do related to that person?
It would more be like, I can't do this anymore. They're unlikely to actually spell it out as factually as that. It's more, I can't do this.
Well, I can't carry on.
I can't carry on. Also huge overwhelm of shame about being a failure, shame about letting the family down, shame, there may be hidden gambling debts. You never really know what's happening with people.
Jeez,
but of course, it doesn't matter what the addiction is and what the cause of pain is. The root cause will be underlying unhealed trauma. And that's where you need specialist help and therapeutic help to help you build enough stability in yourself to look at those root causes.
But it's about keeping them safe in the moment, as you're asking, and also the signposting. So if it's Jack or whatever, wherever it is, we need to make sure we're signposting, because if you do get confronted with that red flag of someone who potentially is in very serious mental health condition, then you need some help, professional help, to help deal with that. So don't try to think that you can deal with it on your own. So keep the person safe.
And they might not listen to you.
They might not,
Yeah.
but get the help on board. Whatever avenue that is that Becki's mentioned, reach out and get the professional support to then help you and them.
And it's all kept confidential.
100%.
And now, just going back to the word therapy will probably put a lot of blokes off for some reason. Therapist, it seems you've got a problem. If you were to reach out, as a bloke was to reach out and get therapy, how much would it cost that bloke an hour, roughly?
Well, obviously in the UK, the NHS do have some services. There's Steps to Wellbeing as well, which you can self-refer to. I mean, it's very, very underfunded, and it's a big bugbear of mine.
Yeah.
And the government is always saying, well, they know it's underfunded, but at the same point, they're all sitting in a puddle crying because they're wet.
Yeah.
Because actually, if you look at the waste that goes in prisons, social services, hospitals with physical issues and addiction problems, if you look at the cost to our National Health Service because of childhood trauma expressing itself in life, I'd say we cannot afford to not deal with childhood trauma at the root causes, get enough resources in place then, and then in the future, you eradicate the expression of ongoing trauma and ancestral trauma.
Yeah.
Because of course, mine and yours trauma then can get passed on to our children,
Absolutely.
which is what anyone in social service will be nodding right now.
So if you were a guy, how much would you spend for a therapy session to just open a door to have a conversation?
Vary between about £40 to about £200 an hour.
And you think that is money really well spent?
I would say your life is so precious, and you may not feel like that right now. But what is most important is, no one can comprehend not being here.
Yeah.
You cannot yourself comprehend not existing. And so if you're in that desperate place, actually what you're looking for is peace. You're looking for an outcome, and you will not get the benefit of that outcome if you go down that path. But if you go through the hands of a really good therapist, you will get that outcome.
Yeah.
They will help you find the peace that you so want while preserving the well-being of all the people who love you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Loving this.
Yeah.
Let's move on to number 3, obesity.
Yeah, obesity. So like I say, I've done a lot of work on men's health in general, and Becki's brought up some brilliant stats. And obviously we've just had a really amazing deep dive conversation there on suicide. And just to say a couple of points on that the men's health stats, unfortunately, do look like men do struggle in certain areas. And I know there's a lot of stereotyping going on, but socioeconomically, access to the help that they need, access to the friends, like you mentioned, the support groups, not thinking they can talk out, not knowing where to go. All of this stuff has been well documented in the research that this is possibly why men are ending up in a critical, chronic condition. And the two things that we're going to talk about next, like you mentioned, would be obesity and type 2 diabetes. And the two things really do go hand in hand. You don't normally have one without the other.
Yeah.
And type 2 diabetes is also really closely linked to cardiovascular disease, which obviously we spoke about at the start. You're not going to see high blood glucose without high bad cholesterol.
So high blood sugar.
High blood sugar. So this is something that is a huge, if not the biggest underlying health problem from a dietary perspective, is the overconsumption of refined sugars. We've just seen in the news recently, I don't know if you've heard about these lunchily things that are coming out.
This is a shocker.
3 influencers. The guy that created Prime has teamed up with 2 other influencers. They've created these lunch boxes for children, which is a bottle of Prime. I think it's a pizza, a packet of sweets.
You're joking, mate.
Like literally just pure, it's not even food. It's just chemicals in a box. And they're going to probably promote it on YouTube and TikTok and all these places. So they're going to brainwash them and get their palates and their minds thinking this way. And the children, poor children, they think this is acceptable.
No, okay.
And this is going to gear them into this life of, unfortunately, eating too much sugar and ultra processed food.
Who are these people passing this?
I don't know.
Who on earth has allowed this to be passed to brainwash kids' minds that they want to go and do it? Like, we saw what happened with Prime. We saw what the Prime was everywhere. All the kids wanted Prime. Some of that Prime, you looked at the back of the content, it's just chemical, unbelievable. It's no good whatsoever.
No, I thought we were getting somewhere because the government has just agreed to ban the junk food ads after 9 p.m. another step in the right direction, but then, we've got the influencers and YouTube and just these big, gigantic corporations behind it all that have just got the power and the funds and the marketing to keep pushing this in front of us all.
Give me an example of someone who can get type 2 diabetes. How long it would take them to get to a point where they realize that they're going to be diabetic, or they are diabetic, but they don't realize just yet?
Yeah. So once you are diabetic, so once you have type 2 diabetes, that's when you have too high amounts of blood sugar or blood glucose in your system, and you will therefore always be classed as a diabetic. You can get your blood sugar down and you can manage it, but like I said, the men that have come forward, and I've done a lot of blood work, you would be unfortunately surprised at the number of people in their 30s and 40s who would be classed as pre-diabetic. And I'm even looking deeper at that, and I'm looking at blood markers for pre-diabetes. So I'm really helping people to prevent this. And you can start to see the early warning signs. So you can start to see changes in your blood glucose by wearing a continuous glucose monitor on your arm, and you can track how food is impacting your blood sugar. So you can see it in real time. A lot of my clients will wear this. And the early signs, funnily enough, are actually hypoglycemic moments. So, when you get a bit jittery and a bit shaky in the afternoon, you have an energy slump, that is a sign that actually you're already creating too much insulin. The reason you're creating too much insulin is because you're eating too much sugar. So you produce more insulin, and so it quickly shuttles the sugar out of your system, and then you have this low and you have this dip, and that's where then you might go into the garage or the supermarket, and there you are, you're presented with the highly processed, high sugar foods, which you're going to just crave and need, and your brain's going to subconsciously go and eat, and there you are in that cycle again. And especially as now we're moving into the winter, we are hardwired to seek out high calorie, high sugar foods. It's a survival mechanism. Talking about obesity, we are hardwired to put on a bit of fat through the winter, because that's our survival mechanism. The problem is we don't need that anymore, because the sugar and the foods, they're everywhere we go. We don't need that ancient survival mechanism. It's being used in a different way. And unfortunately, we're over-consuming calories. So if you eat ultra-processed foods daily, there's a strong chance you're overeating calories by 500 calories per day, because they are so easy to consume. There's just eat them mindlessly. They're addictive. And therefore, we're talking about obesity. Unfortunately, before you know it, you may be presenting with pre-diabetes or diabetes. Can
you, if you walked into a pub, or you walked down the street, or you were at a sports centre, do you look at people and look at blokes and go, I think he might be pre-diabetic?
Potentially. I mean, obviously, Dodge, I've worked with you and your dad, and both of your health is incredible. You've got a great tan, but I can tell from looking at you both, you look after yourself. It's not just the fact that you're in good shape. I can tell by your skin, the lack of bags under your eyes. You've got glowing skin. You just look healthy. And I can see the opposite in quite a few people. It's just obviously what I'm trained to do. It's what I see a lot. You can see people struggling. They've kind of got a bit of a sort of a pale look about them, bags under their eyes, maybe a bit sweaty, slightly overweight. I can see that all the time when I look at people straight away. But this is why we got in contact to begin with. Because we were healthy people, and I'm seeing it all the time with friends of friends. I'm looking and going, oh my God, you look like 20 years older. We went to school together. Like, what have you been eating and drinking the last 20 years? And I see it, and I want to help and say something, but you're best off sometimes just keeping quiet, because it's not my world. But surely they must know that they're not feeling healthy. Surely, because when you eat well, you feel healthy. When you exercise, you feel healthy. When you are losing body fat, you feel healthier. If someone's out there and they're overweight and they don't feel good in themselves, what's the next step they should take to find out whether they are actually pre-diabetic or not? Well, it would be to run the blood work that I've mentioned. So the blood work that I've been doing has been the key, because like you say, you probably might look a bit unhealthy. There's a strong chance you're going to be feeling unwell. You might be struggling with your energy, your sleep, you're just feeling suboptimal, like walking around life just not quite feeling right, and actually subconsciously thinking, if I don't feel right, is there something else going on here? Yeah. Should I be checking my blood work? And in America and the States and in other parts of Europe, it's just a regular occurrence. You get your bloods done every 12 months, whether there's a problem or not. And then you find out, actually, I'm heading towards pre-diabetes. My bad cholesterol's a little bit raised here. My liver is struggling a little bit.
I come and saw you after our chat, myself and my old man and my wife, in fact, and we all had our bloods done. Anyone listening out there, you must go. If you're feeling healthy, go and get a blood test with Layla. If you're not feeling healthy, go and get a blood test with Layla, because this is a game changer.
Yeah, she's done mine too.
It's unreal. Like you get injected, you get the blood test, they send it away, they come back and they give you everything you need to know, whether your test is low or this is good, well that's good, or that's bad. You get your answers. For the sake of a couple of £100, it's like a body MOT to get your answers, to decide, right, are you serious about your body? You go and get your car done for a couple of £100 because you have to each year. We don't have to do it for our bodies and our future and our health and stuff. Yeah. Just go and get them done, because you'll get your answers. Because if someone is having too much sugar in their diet because they like a bottle of white wine on a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday, and they're eating chocolates on the road and they're not moving very far because they're sitting in an office all day, you'll get your answers. Yeah. Do you know straight away when someone's got diabetes? How do you go if someone come to you and go, you knew by looking at them going, I think in your mind you're thinking he might be diabetic. When you get your answers back, how do you tell someone?
Yeah, good question. So first off, there are outliers. So sometimes someone can be presenting and they can be fairly overweight, or they might totally feel like their blood work's going to be terrible, and it comes back and it's actually okay. Metabolically, genetically, we're all very different. We need to check in. We need to check our family history. And I'm really specializing at the moment in cardiovascular health. And if anyone has a family history of heart disease, heart problems, it's vital that you check your blood work and advanced cardiometabolic profile. So yes, I do get some scary results come back. I'm trained and I've done it enough times now to be able to help people through that. So obviously, it's a difficult conversation, but in a way, like I mentioned, the key word here is prevention. Yeah. So a lot of the time I'm helping people to prevent what could potentially be an issue. And that's...
Prevention is the key word there. Yeah. Because anyone listening here go, oh yeah, I'll do it one day, I'll do it one day, I'll do it one day. Just go and get it done, because you'll get your answers. There's no point of saying, oh, I'm going to do it in 3 months, 5 months, and 2 years have gone by. Well, you could have solved the problem now.
But the reason people don't is because it's psychological, right? And they're actually avoiding, they're in denial. One of the biggest things that keeps people unwell mentally, physically and emotionally is keeping themselves in denial of the real problems. Yeah. And I would say that obesity is a psychological issue as it is a health issue, because for the majority of people who would classify as obese, for the majority of those, when you talk to them, their self-worth is very low. They've normally experienced levels of trauma. There was a study called the ACE score study, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's a set of 10 questions. And if you score 1, so you say yes to one of those questions, you've already got a score that's too high. And data shows that if you had, if you answered 1.4 of those questions, if you answered to 4 of those questions a yes, you are 1.4 times more likely to have diabetes. You're also 2 to 2.3 times more likely to have cancer. So there's a direct relationship between how we treat our bodies. I'm a fan of the saying, if you want to see what someone's thinking was like in the past, look at their body today.
Yeah. You've seen something fascinating.
That's a great one-liner.
She's got something fascinating that she's observed.
Yes, which is called emotional armory. And with emotional armory, it is when the body is in a state of being unsafe. So unsafe, it's not safe to change. So they may take up the diet. And I've seen people like this. They have taken up the diet. They have taken up some exercise. So logic and experience would show that they would lose a few pounds. If you make any changes, they would lose a few pounds. No. They don't. What happens is the body and the metabolism start to override the work that's being done, because the overall message to the body, it is not safe for me to be myself. And actually, there's a lot of people unknowingly and subconsciously using size as a way of protecting their sensitive self.
Survival mode is a real place
survival
to be.
mode.
Yep.
So we need to start looking at people who are overweight and not just looking at them needing to control food. They actually need to look at how do you feel about yourself and what has happened to you that makes you feel so unsafe that it's not safe for you to change.
I also look at it as well and see, like, we talk about ultra processed foods. I think the majority of people might not know what ultra processed foods are, but the way I see it is it's a lot easier to eat one ingredient foods.
Real food,
just
actual food.
Actual food. Everyone's so confusing right now. Yeah. Ultra processed food. If you pick up a packet and it's got 10 things written on the back,
20
things with loads of words that you don't know, that is what you call ultra processed foods, and that's crap. Throw it out of the house.
Yep.
Get your fridge filled up with lovely vegetables, nuts, fruits, meats. Even meats. You've got to be careful with meats. Sometimes meats have been injected with ultra processed meats. You look at the back and go, I don't want to put that in my body because
ultra-processed meat's one of the worst,
yeah, but you put ultra-processed food into your body, it's creating
inflammation.
It's creating inflammation, it's creating all these problems. So whatever you put in your mouth, have a bit of discipline and go, no. Because it's easy to grab something when you're hungry and go, that'll do, because you're just used to it. But if you've been doing that for a year, 3 years, 10 years, you get to 20 years, you've had 20 years of it, and you are massively overweight right now, which will cause the stuff we've been talking about, obesity and diabetes. But I just want to know, if you are classified as a diabetic, you phone someone up and went, I've got your results back, I've got something to tell you, you're a diabetic. What does that mean to someone? I want to know some shocking stuff that if you are diabetic, this is what could happen to you.
So diabetes is the start of, unfortunately, a long road to further health issues. So once you get into that diabetic state, with your blood glucose is at a dangerously high level, quite frankly, this will start to have other issues around the body. So first off, you may need to medicate daily. So that might be taking a tablet, or if it gets to the point, you may also need to inject insulin daily. So your pancreas will shut down. It will stop producing insulin. So therefore, you have to be taking insulin yourself every day, which is not nice to have to inject yourself. There's also a very close link between type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So heart disease being the number one biggest killer, underlying all of this is probably this chronic overuse of sugar and the issues with insulin, because it does cause the damage to the arterial lining. Then there are other issues that might happen. So very extreme versions would be the loss of limbs. You can lose your legs.
Someone amputate?
It's a complication of diabetes. Right? Yeah, it's a complication.
Jeez. That's enough. Like if you're out there and you're thinking I'm obese, it's enough. Just going back there a moment, just to rewind there. We're saying about like blokes, where do you go? I didn't know until you and I spoke that I would have to go and get a blood test to find out. You know, this was only a year ago. You know, anyone out there, you're thinking, oh, diabetic, what is that? I'm not too sure. Just go and get a blood test. That's your answer. Yeah.
But then how many people, you know, they've got...
Or they won't know where to go.
Prostate issues. They've got all sorts of things and they just do what men do, which is get on with it, just right? I'm going to get on with it, and I'm going to get on with it, and I'm going to get on with it. And that is the biggest mantra that is keeping men sick and killing them, is getting on with it.
So on a blood test here, Layla, we'll put your details below in here. Anyone out there, please go and click on Layla, get in contact with Layla. She makes it really simple and easy for you to go and get your blood test. Just get your answers. All you want is your answers. Let's move on to number 4, cancer.
Big subject.
Wow. Talking about that, just linking it through. So we just mentioned prostate. So the biggest killers for cancer for men would be prostate, lung, and bowel. So there's been a lot of awareness this year about prostate cancer. There's been some campaigns. So a lot more guys are having their PSA antigen tested. So that's one of the markers that will come in the blood test. But I've had a lot of guys come forward and say, oh, can you add PSA, or can I check my PSA? So this is great. This is like the cervical screening awareness that happened for women. So
it's just when the doctor has to get his rubber glove on, you got to...
This is just a blood test.
Right,
so this will check your levels. Don't worry. I don't do any physical examination.
No, I'm not talking you, but I'm saying...
You can have the rubber glove if you want.
Touch your toes.
Regarding samples and things like that.
But I'm talking guys who are going to go and you've got to go and get your prostate checked out.
If you're having symptoms, yes, a physical examination will happen as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I can see why a lot of blokes don't want to go and do it. Just like, geez, well, you want me to go and touch my toes with a doctor behind you putting a rubber glove on.
But what you've got to remember is when you leave things and neglect things, what you will then have to do will be a lot more.
And it's the same with digestive health. So we haven't really touched on gut health, but talking about bowel cancer, obviously being one of the biggest cancers of men, you know, how many guys have a bit of IBS, a bit of bloating, a bit of acid reflux, irritable bowel syndrome, which is,
what does that mean?
It's a sort of, it's a grey area that you can't be diagnosed with IBS, but it's a collection of symptoms, which actually probably most guys would say, oh yeah, I have IBS.
What is IBS? How would you know if you had it or not?
So it's things such as bloating, troubles with your digestive system, or going to the toilet, acid reflux, you know, just generally a malfunctioning digestive system. So, but they might joke about it. Oh yeah, every time I have a curry, I have to go to the toilet. Or every time I have beer, it makes me feel really bloated. You know, and they might just live with it like that. They might live with a bit of,
and they just think that's part of normal life.
But it's not. So you live like that for many, many years. This is going to cause problems in your large intestine. Okay. So this is going to potentially lead to bowel cancer.
Wow.
Because talking about the foods, we need to be stocking up on fiber. It sounds simple, but fruits, vegetables, antioxidants, real food.
But they're so tasty.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is so tasty. When you got your taste buds and you cut sugar out of, can I speak of my word? When you cut sugar out of your life, your taste buds just become alive. Like you want to go and eat fruit, you want to go and eat vegetables, you want to eat cold vegetables. All this stuff is just amazing. So all the colours and...
The guy I saw last week, similar to the guy I saw last week, we went round in circles because he was with a friend and he didn't want to have the Burger King that his friend was having because he's obviously following his plan. So he didn't. He went to M&S and he got some nuts and some grapes and some real food. And we were talking about this and we came to the conclusion that actually he preferred that. He wasn't doing himself
so much nicer.
He actually preferred eating the real food. Now it sounds simple and it sounds boring, but actually when you're eating real food, you're feeding your gut microbiome.
You're feeding goodness.
You're feeding goodness. So the gut microbiome is going to feed you with anti-inflammatory messages. So those cytokines won't be there.
If you're a guy who has got a belly on him, it gets to a stage where you've put so much ultra processed crap in you and sugar and do you find it hard to go to the toilet or do you bloat so much you're thinking something's not working inside, my gut system isn't working like it used to?
So you've got the additives, the preservatives, the sugars, the ultra-processed foods, this changes the composition of your gut microbiome, the bacteria that's there, and it also damages the gut lining. So this starts to have this chronic underlying impact where you're just not digesting your food properly. You've got more of the pro-inflammatory bacteria that cause the bloating, the irregular, digestive issues, the acid reflux. This all comes from what you're eating, basically.
Wow. And that can also lead to cancer. Ladies, this is unbelievable stuff you're teaching men right now. This is unreal. Like just for the normal bod out there, doesn't need to go and speak to a scientist. Like the powerful information you're giving here for guys is on another level.
But I've had guys come to me and they've done their stool test and it has come back with signs of cancer, but they've caught it early.
And that's the key, is catching these things early.
Early detection is the best prevention.
I can only go from my experience of just getting it done, getting your results and going, and having your answers.
We want to rule out as much as rule in. Peace of mind.
So what are the major cancers for men?
Prostate, lung and bowel.
So we've covered prostate, we've covered bowel. What's lung cancer?
Well, less people are smoking. I mean, vaping is a big problem. We're looking at the stats, and actually there probably has been a decline in lung cancers because of the campaigning around, obviously, cigarettes. But I would say we don't know at the moment what's happening with vaping. It's probably equally, if not even more so, of a problem. And we're talking about guys and their exposure to certain things. So we touched on it earlier. The reports are saying that, unfortunately, guys are exposing themselves to more sort of risk-taking behaviours. The industries they work in.
I love a risk.
I know.
Someone said to me the other day, I said, "You're an addict?" I went, "No." And she said on stage, "But I think you're a risk addict." I thought, You're right. I've never heard that before. I went, you know what, you're right.
But you've been lucky in risk. You've been lucky in risk.
You gain your own luck.
But also, I think men are often exposed to a lot more chemicals in the workplace.
This is it.
Farming,
construction industry,
engineering.
Okay.
All of those sort of. So actually, they get exposed to a lot more carcinogenic chemicals, and even today, no one's realizing what they're doing to their body. But also, I think very underlooked part of cancer again is to do with our emotional health and our mental health.
What do you think that's related to cancer, do you?
Very much so. I referenced earlier a study called the ACE score study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what the data found that if you answered yes to 4 of the 10 questions, you are 2 to 2.3 times more likely to have cancer. Now, I also have a theory, having spoken to thousands of people in my work and, in life as well. And I'm also a cancer survivor myself. And that is, I am yet to speak to anybody who didn't have a stressful occasion within 3 years of being diagnosed of cancer.
Yeah.
And yet, a lot of people won't understand they'd had, I got divorced. It's fine now, they'll say, but, I lost my dad, but I hadn't really seen him for 15 years. But they won't realize the impact that has had on them. So I have a real theory that we haven't really started to cross-reference the impact that shock and trauma has on changing the behavior of your cells and your immune system to therefore keep cancer at bay.
What is cancer?
It's an overgrowth of cells. So the cells become overactive. So we've all got cancer.
So just for example, to keep it really simple, in your cells, is cancer like a black cell with the red cell, and more black cells build up, which passes it around your body? Because when you do a screening or someone who passed the cancer, you can see like on their lungs, it's a lot more dark. Is there something that can feed cancer to speed cancer up?
Sugar.
It's sugar. Mate, why is the sugar? Why are we allowed to have sugar? Yeah. Why is the sugar? When you go down to the high street, you go into a supermarket. I watched a film called That Sugar Film. I don't know if anyone's watched it. Go and check it out. An Australian guy goes to America and lives like an American style for 2 months or whatever. And they did this sort of shot that they went into the supermarket, and 98% of the supermarket was packed full of sugar, apart from the aisle where it was fresh fruit and vegetables.
Like 5%, 10%.
Yeah.
The rest of
it, everything is sugar. Like you go and have chicken for dinner. It's been injected with sugar. You go and have some bacon. It's got in sugar. It's like, how on earth is this allowed? Yeah, we know why it's allowed, because the corporates are earning fortunes from it, which is then putting pressure on our NHS, and it's full circle.
Well, they also they also are the major sponsors of TV, media, and et cetera, et cetera. So without their funding, so many systems of media would collapse.
Wow. Yeah. Let's move on to the 5th one, and we've touched on it already. Diabetes. We've kind of touched on that one, but it's one that is not really talked enough, I don't think, around men. Yeah. And it's something that needs to be brought to the attention of men who accidentally or don't realise how much sugar they're having when they wake up in the morning, having cereal that's been coated with sugar. They don't really realise. Later on, they have a quick snack. They go to fill up the car, or they go somewhere and they get a snack or a £3 meal deal with a load of...
Because they're on the road, they're travelling. A lot of guys are, construction or building sites, for example, and they're on the road, and it's very difficult to go to places to get healthy, real food, But looking at the stats, so obesity-wise, the UK has now overtaken the US in terms of percentage of obese people.
You are joking, mate. The UK has overtaken America
in terms of percentage of obese.
Oh my God.
But they have more super obese. So they're still ahead, but we're not.
They'd have to beat us in some way, wouldn't they?
They like to win.
Yeah, they've got the super obese, but we're not far behind, right?
But that's changed. Like that. If you think about like the 70s and 80s, when people on the beach, everyone was lean. Everyone was lean. All of a sudden, if you go on holiday now and you walk down the beach, I'm seeing more and more overweight people.
But was that the low fat era that caused that?
Yeah. Now this.
I just don't. I think there was less sugar back then. There was less options. I just think there's so many options right now. You can get food anywhere you want, and it's just,
So talking about type 2 diabetes, the stats say there's 850,000 people walking around the UK with diabetes who don't know they've got it. The signs
nearly
are there.
1 million people.
Yeah, the signs are there. You actually lose weight after you put on weight, you start to lose weight because your cells are working differently. You might have struggle sleep with energy, more need to go to the toilet, to urinate, blurred vision. There are some signs and symptoms that come along with this. But like you're saying, you're sort of fascinated about this link between what we're eating and this type 2 diabetes that's really obviously very prevalent, that then can lead to the cancers and the heart disease, for example.
When you eat crap, you crash.
Yeah.
When you eat nice foods, it makes you happier.
Exactly.
Like it's so simple.
Yeah.
Like if you're feeding yourself nice, healthy food, you feel good about yourself.
And then you make better decisions.
Yeah.
You're more productive, you get more done, you have better relationships.
It reminds me of like alcohol. Like nothing good comes from alcohol.
But
all the negative stuff in life links to alcohol. When you don't drink alcohol, all the positive things happen.
But a lot of people don't have the baseline of what it feels like to feel good. So you're coming at this as being a place that you know what it feels like to feel good.
Yeah.
But for someone who's had extensive trauma, and obviously there's a lot of emotional connection to food, as well as dopamine hits that come from sugar, etc. But if you don't have a baseline of what it is to feel good, or if actually being connected to yourself puts you right in all your trauma, your negative thinking and your pain, then you haven't got that baseline to move in and out of. So I think one of the most difficult thing is coming out of denial. It doesn't matter if you're facing giving up an addiction, be it food, alcohol, work, gambling, exercise, whatever it is. One of the hardest things to deal with is to face the denial that you've surrounded yourself, the belief system that you enjoy this food, the belief system that, I'll just get on with it.
Yeah.
You have to face up to the denial that you are under. And that is the hardest place of making any change.
Or breaking a habit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Breaking a habit takes 100 days.
Yeah, you might have the desire, but you haven't made the commitment.
Yeah.
And if you haven't made the commitment, you haven't made a decision.
Yeah.
So start with making a decision.
And it's so brave and so strong when you do.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Well, it's powerful. Discipline.
So powerful.
Discipline's the most powerful thing in the world.
To see the changes that have been happening, Dodge, it's been really inspiring.
Yeah.
The commitment that people, I mean, I'm not the one doing the hard work. It's the people that come to see me that are doing the real graft.
You're giving them the confidence and you're giving them the knowledge and the power.
Them. Yeah. I'm supporting them through it, and I've got a skill to do that. But it's the people themselves that are having, the guts and the strength to come forward and go, I'm going to own this now. I'm going to look into this and I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah. Ladies, I've absolutely loved this.
It's been an absolute thrill to join in with you again and talk about our favourite subjects.
Amazing, literally amazing.
And help people too.
And help people. That's the key to this podcast. We've got a platform that has copious amounts of people watching, millions a week watching, and on YouTube and all the different platforms.
And you're using it for such good, Dodge.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
amazing.
that. Yeah, we have some proper characters on YouTube as a pair are fantastic.
Well, we've had some pretty good chats about everything. We're equally as passionate.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I really do appreciate your time and your expertise. And anyone listening down there, we'll leave it on the show notes below. Please contact Layla. Please contact Becki. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Dodge.
you so much, girls.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice one. Hi, guys. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Can you do us a favour and subscribe to the channel? It's totally free and it massively helps our show. Cheers, guys.